started with an announcement, small, ordinary, almost laughable in its delivery. "We'll have Brian speak on behalf of the family." Ethan said it casually, like he was assigning snacks or asking someone to grab ice. The living room buzzed with activity. Folding chairs being tested for wobble, Claire fussing over name cards, someone arguing over centerpieces. A playlist of soft instrumental hymns played from a Bluetooth speaker on the mantel, looping inoffensively. I was standing by the fireplace, one hand on the edge of the mantel, watching it all like a guest who had arrived too early and didn't know where to stand. Then Ethan looked at me, directly. "And you?" he said, lips tight, voice clean, not quite cruel, just final. "Know your place. Stay out of it." There was no laughter, no follow-up wink, no recovery line, just those 6 words. The room didn't pause. That was the part that sank deepest. Nobody flinched. Claire kept taping a name card to the corner of a table. Brian didn't say a thing. Not even Karen, my wife. Not a glance, not a hand to my arm, not a whisper to soften the blow. They had heard it, and they had agreed. Something settled in me then. Not rage, not even hurt. Really, something quieter, denser, like cement hardening in the bottom of my chest. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't youthful arrogance. It was structure, deliberate, hierarchy written in real time. I was not the father. I was not the speaker. I was not the family. I was the placeholder they needed to keep the lights on. The man with the steady income, the reliable car, the hands that built and fixed and funded. The man who could be counted on to mow the lawn, sign the checks, and disappear behind the curtain when it was time for the spotlight. I didn't speak. There was no point. Words would have only dirtied the moment, turned it into a spat they could laugh about later. That's what they wanted. A scene. A reason to call me emotional. Instead, I chose what I've always been best at. Silence. Not submission, strategy. I walked into the kitchen. The noise behind me softened as I stepped across the tile. The refrigerator hummed. The countertop was lined with 2 aluminum trays of deviled eggs and a platter of ham sliders someone had driven 30 miles to pick up. I opened the bottom drawer beneath the coffee maker. Inside was a manila folder, unmarked. Just paperwork. Receipts. Contracts. I took it out, laid it flat, and opened it. The venue rental, $3,200. Paid by me. Deposit already processed. Catering add-on, $800. Paid by me. Rental chairs, floral arrangements, extra cleanup fee. Paid by me. My name on every line. My credit card. My signature. My trust. I ran my thumb along the edge of the venue invoice. Then I flipped it shut. Across the kitchen, a row of christening gifts sat lined along the counter, all pale blue and white. I spotted the silver rattle I had ordered weeks ago, engraved with Liam's initials, still boxed, still wrapped in my own handwriting. Know your place. I opened the cabinet above the fridge where we keep the whiskey, poured a half-inch into a rocks glass. No ice. No toast, just the burn of clarity. In that moment, I saw the blueprint for everything I needed to do. Quietly, legally, with enough documentation to silence even the most performative grief. I didn't need to argue my value. I didn't need to fight for recognition. I only needed to step back and take everything I had brought with me. I had always been the support beam they never noticed until it cracked. Let them feel the house shift. I returned to the living room a few minutes later. No one noticed I had gone. Claire was still fussing over the name cards. Brian was now showing Ethan something on his phone, probably some sample speech. Karen was lighting candles, her face set in the serene calm she wears like armor. Like if she looks peaceful enough, no one will accuse her of choosing sides. And in truth, she hadn't chosen. That was the problem. She had let the sides choose themselves. "Can someone run to Kroger?" Claire asked. "We're out of lemon water." Ethan glanced toward Brian. I watched it all as if underwater. Their voices muffled. Their bodies moving in rhythms I no longer belonged to. I had built this event. I had paid for it, called the vendors, made the reservations. I had booked the church, coordinated the catering, even designed the little invitation cards that everyone now mocked as too formal. I had, in every sense, acted as the family's spine. But in the end, they had appointed another head. I left again, this time upstairs. My office, a corner desk littered with printer paper and envelopes. I sat down, flipped open my laptop, and began to write. Nothing emotional, nothing vengeful, just facts. A line-by-line breakdown of every financial contribution I had made to this christening. Receipts scanned and attached. Bank transfers detailed. Vendor invoices. And at the bottom, one final line. All deposits canceled. Funds redirected. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. If I was not family enough to stand and speak, then I was not family enough to fund their theater. They had appointed Brian. Let Brian handle the costs. Of course, he couldn't. He was the ornamental figure they preferred. Polished, affable, blood-adjacent. The kind of man who'd take the microphone, thank everyone warmly, pose for photos, and disappear before the check arrived. That was the man they wanted. What they had used was me, and that usage ended now. I saved the document, printed 2 copies, and slid them into separate envelopes. I labeled them plainly, Clare and Church Admin. Then I opened a third, this one for Karen. For completeness. I didn't expect her to read it. She never liked paper trails. But this one wouldn't be ignored. I didn't sleep that night. Not from rage. Not from heartbreak. From the kind of restless clarity that comes when you finally decide to stop playing the part others have written for you. I sat by the window and watched the backyard lights flicker off one by one. Somewhere downstairs, Karen moved from room to room, finishing little tasks in silence. She didn't come upstairs. I didn't go down. It was, in a way, the truest reflection of our marriage. 2 people passing like ships in the same house, bound not by love but by shared inertia. A partnership maintained more by habit than heat. Morning came slow and gray. I rose before the rest, put on the shirt they all said was too formal for a christening, and sat at the kitchen table, envelopes in hand. Today I would stay out of it. I would not speak on behalf of the family. I would simply act like what I had been told I was, nobody. But this time I would act like nobody with receipts. And that's the part they would never forget. 2 days before the christening, I made the first call. It was just past noon. The sun threw weak December light through the office blinds as I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over the keypad. The cursor blinked in an open spreadsheet beside me. Every line, every cost, every transfer meticulously recorded. At the top, christening Liam, December 10th. I called the venue first. Morning, I said. I need to cancel an event. December 10th. Yes. The post-ceremony luncheon. Confirmation code 273 AGH9. The receptionist paused. Sir, I'm not sure. That's very last minute. We typically don't. There's a clause in the rental agreement, I interrupted, already flipping to the 3rd page of the PDF I had printed 3 nights ago. Section 4C. Cancellations within 72 hours incur a 10% penalty. The rest is refundable. I'm willing to eat the 10. There was a long silence on the line, followed by rustling papers. Then a cough. Then, yes, you're right. I see that here. I'll be by this afternoon for the refund receipt. Yes, sir. Click. Next, the caterer. Then the rental company that supplied the extra folding chairs and floral centerpieces. Each conversation followed the same pattern, polite, firm, legally grounded. No emotion, just contract execution. Each refund was secured, either partially or in full, by 3 p.m. I had emails confirming close to $3,600 returned to the card on file. My card, my signature, my event. Now, my correction. That evening, Karen asked if I wanted to finalize the seating chart. Ethan and Claire think Brian should sit between them up front, she said, folding laundry without looking at me. I stared at her for a beat too long before answering. Sure, if that's what they want. She hesitated. You're not upset, are you? I smiled. Not at all, because upset implies surprise. And by that point, there was nothing left in me but math. She didn't ask further. The next morning, I visited our bank. Not to transfer funds, but to open something new. A trust. Specifically, an irrevocable education trust under Liam's name. Not a general savings account. Not a casual gift fund that could be raided when times got tough. No, this would be permanent. Untouchable. Legal protection against future manipulation. Claire or Brian or Ethan could plead later, but the funds would be sealed. For Liam's future, and only his, I transferred every dollar refunded from the canceled venue into it. Then I added more, enough to round the figure to an even $10,000. A seed, a foundation, something real, not for applause, not for validation, for principle. The notary raised an eyebrow when she read the cover letter attached to the trust. "You sure you want to use language this direct?" she asked, pen hovering above the page. I nodded. "I want it understood," she signed. And with that, my erasure became an act of record. The morning of the christening came soft and slow. Fog clung low to the pavement, and the cold made everything feel heavier. Claire arrived first, in a pale blue dress and heels too thin for winter, carrying Liam in his white baptismal gown. Ethan followed with Brian, both in matching suits, laughing about some joke I wasn't included in. Karen wore cream, her hair pulled back like she was going to a wedding instead of a reckoning. The church was already half full by the time I arrived. St. Agnes, modest, familiar. I had personally arranged the pew markers, printed the programs, and even paid to have the organist stay overtime for the reception. Or what was supposed to be the reception. The ceremony moved quickly. Prayers. A brief reading. Father Reynolds spoke Liam's name with quiet reverence as the water touched his forehead. Claire teared up. Ethan beamed. Brian stood stiff and proud, his hands folded like a politician at a campaign stop. I stood in the third pew, silent, hands clasped, invisible. When it ended, the congregation began shifting, coats buttoning, small talk flaring up. Guests asked about directions. Are we still heading to the venue in Gehenna? Was it the timberline or the woodlawn? A few even looked toward me, as if I might offer clarity. But I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because the venue, the real venue, no longer existed. What remained was a last-minute potluck in the church's fellowship hall. Claire had scrambled the night before. Once she realized something had changed. There were whispers, tension hiding beneath plastic tablecloths and mismatched crockpots. No decorations, no champagne, no piano player, just confusion. And then, as if summoned by silence itself, Father Reynolds approached me near the vestibule. The man had been our parish priest for nearly a decade. He had buried neighbors, married couples, baptized children whose feet I had measured for shoes at the outlet mall. He stopped in front of me, adjusted his collar. "I thought you reserved the timberline," he said softly. I met his eyes. "I did," I replied. "Then I unreserved it." He paused. "Why?" And there it was, the moment, the question. The quiet verdict asked not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. Why? Why would the man who had paid for every detail, the venue, the food, the music, the linens, suddenly vanish from the equation? Why would the pillar remove himself? I reached into my coat pocket and handed him an envelope. Inside, the notarized cost breakdown. A single-page printout showing every dollar I had contributed, refunded, and redirected. He flipped it open, scanned it briefly. His brow furrowed. Then he looked at me, really looked. "I see," he said. That was all. No lecture. No attempt to smooth it over. Just understanding. He folded the envelope, tapped it against his palm, and said, "Boundaries are rare in families. Rarer still when they're drawn in ink instead of blood." And then he walked away. The reception that followed was small, sparse. Claire tried to spin it as intimate. But the mood never recovered. The food ran short. The seating was cramped. Someone knocked over a punch bowl. Brian fumbled through a toast, unsure whether to acknowledge me or avoid the topic altogether. No one asked where the original venue had gone. No one dared, because they knew. They might not have said it aloud, but they felt it. Something had shifted. Cost had been revealed. A silence had spoken, and it had left fingerprints everywhere. On the folding chairs, the lukewarm pasta salad, the quiet mutters between guests who expected more. And through it all, I sat in the corner, holding Liam, his fingers wrapped around mine, impossibly small. And I whispered to him, "You're not the reason for any of this. You're the only reason I stayed this long." He cooed, smiled, gurgled something that sounded like peace, and I knew I had made the right decision. Not loud, not cruel, but permanent. It was after the cleanup. The folding chairs scraped against linoleum. The last spoonfuls of store-brand potato salad were scraped into foil. Someone's toddler knocked over a stack of paper cups and cried when no one noticed. Most of the guests had already left, drifting out in twos and threes, offering Claire tight smiles and promises to catch up soon. The hall felt abandoned already, not empty, just hollow, like a room where something had happened and no one wanted to admit it. I waited until the last thank you had been murmured, until Ethan was outside, helping load Liam into the car, until Brian had disappeared somewhere, probably checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, wondering if the speech he'd delivered had made the right impression. Then I approached Claire. She was at the kitchen counter, wiping her hands on a napkin, her dress wrinkled now, the tension of the day pooling in her shoulders. "Claire," I said softly. "A moment." She turned, startled, like I had risen from the floor. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I held out the envelopes. She stared at them. "What's this?" "One is for Liam. One is for you." She hesitated, reached for them like they might burn. Inside the first, the notarized trust documents signed, sealed, and registered. A legal commitment to Liam's education. An irrevocable account. A sum that would grow while the rest of us forgot how to speak to each other. A future secured by a man who'd been disinvited from the present. Inside the second, the financial breakdown. Venue cancellation. Refund confirmation. Where the money had gone. And more importantly, why. I watched her open the second envelope first. Her eyes scanned it, slow at first, then faster. She flipped to the final page, saw the sum redirected into the trust, and froze. "You canceled the venue?" she asked, voice cracking with disbelief. "You? When? Why didn't?" "You appointed Brian," I said quietly. That made it clear. She stepped back as if struck. I didn't say." "No," I agreed. You didn't say anything." The words hung there. Not accusations, just facts. She looked down at the papers again, then back at me. Her voice was small. "I thought you understood. That maybe I just wanted him to feel like the father I offered. The one who steps in when the cameras are out and the guests are watching." She didn't answer. I didn't need her to. "I have always paid," I said. Quietly, fully, willingly. "I've never asked to be thanked. Never asked to be noticed. But I will not fund my own disappearance." Her eyes glistened. She blinked hard. "You're overreacting. It was just a speech." "No, it wasn't." I stepped closer. "It was a reassignment. Public. Deliberate. And when you stood by, you made your choice. So I made mine." She clutched the envelopes to her chest. "He's not even contributing, Brian. Not like you. I just thought. You thought I wouldn't mind," I said. "Because I never complain. Because I carry the weight and never ask who else is lifting. Because silence looks like agreement." "I thought you'd understand," she whispered. "I do," I said. "Now." Her hands trembled. She looked away. And for a long moment, neither of us said anything. The church hall buzzed with the last hum of fluorescent lights and the rattle of folding tables. In the far corner, someone's child laughed. Somewhere outside, Ethan called out instructions. Brian's voice echoed after. Too loud, too polished, like he was still on stage. Claire swallowed. Her voice, when it returned, was hoarse. "I didn't mean to erase you. You didn't have to mean it," I said. "You only had to allow it." She wiped her cheek. This trust, it's permanent? Yes. Even now. Especially now. A silence bloomed between us. Not hostile. Not even sad. Just final. You're not punishing him, she said, nodding toward the parking lot. No, I agreed. I'm protecting his son. She nodded, slowly, as if the weight of it had finally settled on her. Then her shoulders sagged. I didn't expect this, she admitted. That, I said, is exactly why it had to be done. We didn't speak again that day. She left through the side door, envelopes clutched in her coat, eyes red. I stayed behind, helped fold the last chairs, wiped down the counters. Father Reynolds found me near the coat rack, hanging up one last discarded baby blanket. She's confused, he said. I know. She feels guilty. She should. He studied me for a long time. Then, I've seen a lot of families fall apart, usually loudly. You're the first I've seen collapse in silence. I didn't answer. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. That kind of clarity? That's not anger. That's grief. Don't forget that. I nodded, but I didn't agree. This wasn't grief. It was emancipation. Outside, the wind had picked up. The church parking lot was nearly empty now. Just a few cars, and a scatter of confetti someone had tried and failed to sweep. I stood by my own car for a while, keys in hand, watching the sky shift from dull gray to a softer blue. In the distance, I could see Ethan laughing. Brian hoisted Liam into the air like a prize. Claire stood beside them, arms folded, the envelopes still tucked against her chest. None of them looked my way. I got in the car, drove home, alone, but lighter, because for the first time in years, I hadn't swallowed it. I hadn't absorbed the slight. I hadn't rationalized someone else's disrespect into something I could endure. I had drawn a line, and I had done it without raising my voice. That night, Karen didn't ask about the venue. She didn't mention the envelopes. She lay beside me like a stranger, her body turned away, her silence no longer soft, just hollow. The kind of silence that dares you to speak first, only so it can punish you for breaking it. I didn't. I stared at the ceiling, counted my breaths, and told myself this was what strength looked like. Not fists, not fury, documentation, paper trails, trusts, and a boundary so clear it could be notarized. They say confrontation clarifies things. But in my case, it didn't. It didn't fix the way Claire avoided my eyes when we crossed paths. It didn't soften Ethan's sarcasm, or wipe the smugness from Brian's Sunday school smile. It didn't make Karen reach for my hand at night the way she used to, back when we still imagined we were building something that would last. What it did, instead, was reset the terrain. Not healed, revealed. The slope of every relationship tilted slightly. Gravity rearranged. Some things slipped away without protest. Others clung in strange, unexpected ways. The week after the christening passed like sediment settling after a flood. Ethan didn't mention the venue. He barely mentioned anything at all. When I came downstairs the next morning, he was already gone. Not a note, not a message. Just the sound of his car reversing out of the driveway like a man running from a bill. Brian kept showing up. More now than before. He brought over dinner one night, lasagna, store-bought but transferred into a glass baking dish to pass for homemade. He acted like everything was fine. Asked how the old man was doing. I smiled, laughed once, said nothing. Karen moved through the house like she was underwater. Cleaning more than usual. Wiping things that didn't need wiping. Folding the same towels twice. She didn't ask about the trust. Didn't acknowledge the documents I had laid at our family's feet like a verdict. She only asked once, in passing, whether I planned to return the venue reservation sometime next year. I told her there wouldn't be another reservation, and that was the end of it. But Liam was different. I began seeing him more often. Claire brought him by twice the following week. Alone. No fanfare. No explanations. Just her and a diaper bag. Knocking quietly on the back door like she didn't want the others to know she was here. He needs to stretch his legs, she said. He couldn't walk yet. But I understood. She watched me feed him applesauce in the kitchen, watched the way he reached for my sleeve, the way he giggled when I clicked my tongue against my teeth. She didn't speak much, just sat there, hands in her lap, eyes bouncing between the baby and the floor. On the third visit, she said it. I didn't know how much you had done. Not really. I kept feeding Liam. She continued. When I saw the breakdown, the trust, the refunds, everything, I felt, I don't know, like someone had flipped on a light. Still, I said nothing. She laughed quietly, bitter. Ethan's still pretending it didn't happen, still defending Brian like it's his job. But I see it now. What you've done. What we took. I looked at her. Too late. She didn't flinch. Maybe. Maybe not. Do you regret it? I asked. She shook her head. Not the trust. That was right. But the rest? The way we treated you? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. A month passed. Liam's trust gained interest. Claire stopped bringing Brian around. Ethan moved back into his apartment. No goodbye. No call. I only knew because his laundry stopped appearing in the hall. Karen and I still slept in the same bed. But the space between us grew. At night, I would lie on my side, listening to the sound of her breath, shallow, uneven, and wonder what betrayal sounded like when it finally broke through silence. Would she cry? Would she scream? Or would she just keep folding towels and wiping down clean counters until one day the house was so polished we disappeared? One night, she finally asked, "Do you hate me?" I didn't answer right away. She turned toward me. "Michael." "No," I said. "Then why does it feel like you're gone?" I looked at the ceiling. "Because I was never here the way you think I was." "What does that mean?" "It means I was tolerated, not loved, included for convenience, not respect." "That's not true." "It is," I said, calmly, quietly, "and the difference matters." She was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know how to balance it," she whispered. "Ethan's your stepson. Brian's his real father." I didn't want to push too hard. "And so you didn't push at all," I said. "You let them decide who I was. And they decided I was replaceable. I didn't think you'd care that much." I turned to her then. "I was a father to a boy who didn't ask for one. I paid for his braces, his schooling, his meals. I sat in bleachers. I taught him to drive. I never once corrected anyone when they called me his dad. I paid for that title in sweat, in silence, in sacrifice. And then I watched it handed to another man like a party favor." She stared at me. "Wouldn't you care?" She nodded. But no apology came. Only silence. Spring arrived early that year. Unseasonable warmth. Trees budding too soon. People said it felt like a blessing. To me, it felt like warning. Everything was changing. I received a letter in the mail from the trust administrator. Liam's fund had matured ahead of schedule thanks to a one-time bonus interest credit. The balance had grown. It was a small detail, but it made me smile. I printed the statement and mailed it to Claire. 3 days later, she sent back a thank you note. Handwritten. No hearts. No emojis. Just, "Thank you for giving my son what I didn't realize he needed." That night, Karen found the note on the kitchen counter. She read it, set it down, said nothing. But when I walked into the living room later, she was crying. Not sobbing. Just quiet tears running down her face as she stared out the window, watching the first lightning bugs of the season flicker against the glass. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked. "No," I said. "Then what do you want?" I thought about it. Then I said, "I want to matter, and I want you to fight for me when other people try to erase me." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, I think she understood what I meant. Liam's first birthday came quickly after that. The party was small. No Brian. No Ethan. Just Claire, her mother, a few cousins, a cake too large for the guest list, and Liam, grinning, frosting in his hair, babbling nonsense as if the world had never betrayed a soul. Claire handed me a wrapped box. Inside, a photo. Me and Liam, asleep on the couch, his hand wrapped around my thumb. No caption. No frame. Just the moment. I said thank you. She nodded. Later that night, as I sat on the porch with a glass of water and the sound of distant laughter echoing from the neighbor's yard, I thought about all of it. The speech I didn't give, the venue that never was, the line I drew, the family that adjusted not instantly, not willingly, but inevitably in response to that line. And I asked myself, as I watched a moth flutter against the porch light, was I wrong? Was I cruel? Or did I simply remind people that love without respect is decay? I don't know. I may never know. But Liam will have a future, and I will never again fund my own erasure. So I ask you, would you have stayed silent? Would you have kept paying? Or would you have done exactly what I did, drawn the line and let the silence speak?